Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, dear viewers, to a new episode of The Pool of Ideas, and I'm your host for the program, Junaid Dar. As the title suggests, we are talking about ideas, ideologies from across the world, those ideologies that are affecting our daily lives or did affect our daily lives. And this program is unique in a number of different ways. First and foremost, we talk about ideologies in a very comprehensive manner, so we get a full understanding of these concepts. And secondly, we also look at them from an Islamic perspective to see what does Islam say about these ideologies, and not just that, but also to have a look at the impact that these ideologies have had on the Muslim communities. So today we're going to be looking at another ideology, and that is Orientalism. So let us begin by introducing our guest, and then we go into our questions. We have with us in the studio Dr. Mahmoud. I'd like to welcome you to the program. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me once more.
Thank you very much. Doctor, I would like to talk today about Orientalism. Could I ask you to first define for us what exactly is it that we're talking about?
Orientalism, from its name, it is related to the Orient. Orient is the Middle East, or the whole of the Middle East and Far East and so on. So Orientalism is basically, and why do we deal with it as an ideology? Because Orientalism is essentially an ideology that has nothing to do with science. It viewed Islam from a certain perspective, okay? Not objectively, but subjectively.
Right.
So Orientalism in its basic line or basic line definition is the study of the Orient, of the Islamic world. Okay? But this definition has, of course, changed with Edward Said.
Right. In that case, can I ask you to elaborate further on Edward Said and his book, please?
In 1977, Edward Said has written a book called Orientalism, and in that book he came up with a very important idea that, far from being an innocent, motivated by an innocent desire to know others or the Islamic Orient, Orientalists knew Islam, studied Islam in order to control it, in order to make it known to the West, and make imperial expansion possible by providing it with information. So knowledge and power were related.
Right.
The more you know about Islam, the more you become capable of controlling it. So knowledge, to know is to control. So knowledge was basically not an objective kind of science, or it was the kind of subjective science that wanted to portray its subject matter in a specific way as to make it possible to control.
So Doctor, you mentioned that there's a connection here between Orientalism and Imperialism. Can I ask you to just elaborate a little bit further? What do you mean by that? How was Orientalism connected with Imperialism?
For example, some of the good Orientalists were officials in the East India Company. Those who studied Islam, the Bengal. There were people who were part and parcel of the trade, the East India Company, for example. Let us say people who studied Islam, like Snoek Horkrone is a Dutch writer, a Dutch scholar. He studied Islam in order to make it known and possible to control Indonesia, for example. So the very fact studying Islam was never innocent. It basically meant that the more you know about Islam, the more you can control it through knowledge.
It's also very interesting. There are great names in the Oriental world, like Bernard Lewis, for example, who talks about what went wrong in the Muslim society. But how they put in so much effort into learning Islam simply to control the Muslims. Is that correct?
Of course, it starts with a passion, but this passion is not very far from the Western spirit of expansion. So this desire to know is a desire as well motivated by a desire to see your country advance and more prosperous.
Okay.
Okay, people like Bernard Lewis, for example, has written books that place Islam as a medieval and as a religion that is not for the modern times.
Okay, and could I also ask you about, you said that the hidden goal is to control the Muslims, but this control, is it a military control or is it a psychological control?
No, I mean by providing, for example, when Napoleon went into his expedition to Egypt, he has read The Journey to Egypt and Syria, written by Nerval.
Okay.
Okay, so here the books written about the Islamic world were not just justifications after the fact. They were the kind of projects,
manuscripts for war.
Manuscripts for people like Napoleon and others.
Okay.
They has introduced Islam into the knowledge of an imperial and an expansionist world.
Okay, so would you then say that Orientalism is a racist way of looking at Islam?
Yeah, because Orientalism did not view Muslims as normal human beings. They viewed Muslims as some kind of aberration, some aberration from humanity. They were barbaric, they were, and Islam as an arrested, in a state of arrested development.
Okay.
Renan, a French linguist and orientalist, has used this phrase, développement arrêté, or arrested development, that Islam has stopped from developing, which is not true.
Okay.
So basically, Islam had to be characterized as violent, as negative, as barbaric, in order to make Europe's and the West's image brighter, by putting it against a very degenerate Muslim world.
Okay, and is it fair to say that the efforts of the Orientalists have had a negative effect on the development of the Muslim world?
Basically, yes, by interfering in the educational system, by producing an Islamic world that's a negative.
Okay.
So, and there is what Edward Said characterized as orientalizing. Self-orientalizing meant that people, Muslims who went to get their doctorates and bachelor's, masters from Western universities, studied under Orientalists, and came with this Orientalized Islam or Orientalized Arabs, and started teaching that to Muslims in universities.
Interesting.
So your identity has become a function of what the West, of the mirror image in the West, not any real Islam.
Okay, and would it be fair to say that these people, like you said, who study in these institutions, when they come back, they have an inferiority complex, finding themselves as second class?
Yeah, and that's why they have an inferiority complex, but they find that the only way, no, they have a superiority complex, in fact, because they studied in the West, they speak English or one Western language, they are put in positions of decision-making, in professors at universities. They decide what to teach, how to teach it, what kind of stuff to teach, and they usually teach Orientalist material and Orientalist thesis about Islam, and it is a degenerate civilization. So basically, they control the imagination of Muslims and limit their view of their past by imposing a curricula that takes a Western point of view about Islam. So Islam is not taught from the point of view of real Muslims or people who are Muslims and aware of its history. It is taught from the point of view of Westerners. It is like knowing about America through reports written by the KGB, for example. Yeah, or knowing about Palestinians through the archives of Israel. It's very hard to know about yourself from a different point of view that is limiting, and that is because usually a point of view is always a reflection of the interests of the West rather than any real Islam or
Okay.
Orient.
And Doctor, over the last 50, 60 years, we've seen post-World War II, a number of major universities popping up in the Arab world, and many of them being driven by Orientalists or Western attitudes. What influence have they had on the Muslim world?
You're talking about students who study
certain institutions, you've had institutions that are based on Orientalist ideas in the Muslim world.
Yeah, I mean, what is interesting is that people even like Ahmad Amin, and a Muslim philosopher and educationist, Taha Hussein, for example, is the outcome of Western knowledge.
Okay.
Taha Hussein studied in France, and he came back with ideas and theses taken from Orientalism, and he disseminated his ideas and theses among his students.
Okay.
Theses that mainly question Muslim history, question the origins of Arabic poetry, and questioning the dates of that poetry, thus bringing the whole Islamic tradition into question.
Okay.
So basically, these ideas and ideologies are destructive because they're self-orientalizing. They know about the self through the eyes of the others.
Okay. And that obviously has a negative impact on the Muslim masses themselves when they see contradicting opinions coming from a professor who's graduated from France and a local imam, for example, saying two different things.
Yeah, so you have like you can think of Orientalist knowledge as a divisive kind of knowledge, because you have traditional knowledge, you have Muslim historians, you have evidence, you have books written throughout Muslim tradition, and then an Orientalist or a student of Orientalists brushes all that aside and says, well, listen to me, that's what the Orientalists said, and that's like the objective knowledge you have to study and believe in.
Okay, excellent. Doctor, on that note, let's take a small break, get to have a little rest, and then when we come back, we'll continue with our discussion on Orientalism. Dear viewers, let's take a short break here with our topic of Orientalism, and then when we come back, inshallah ta'ala, we want to have a look at the impact that Orientalism had on the Muslim world and its role still to this day. Where is it manifested and where is it growing, and what is really going on? So let's take a short break, stretch your arms, stretch your legs, and then when we come back, we'll continue with our discussion.
Open your eyes to the world of today. Open your eyes to the world of today.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear viewers, after a very short break, joining us on our fantastic new series of the Pool of Ideas, where we examine, look into different ideologies and try to give a comprehensive understanding to each of these terms and try to put an Islamic understanding to it as well. Our topic for today is Orientalism. So let us get back to the doctor and ask him the remaining questions. Doctor, we're talking prior to the break about Orientalism and the institutions of Orientalism. Can I ask you to talk about Orientalism today? Would you say it is still in full force and there are Orientalists out there studying Islam for the sake of imperialist agendas?
I wouldn't say it's in full force, because Edward Said's intervention in 1977 proved very damaging to the overall structure of Orientalism.
Okay.
People now, Orientalism, the word Orientalism is now used as a pejorative term. So if you're talking about Islam in a specific way, then what you're saying is called Orientalism, and that's a negative attitude. If your scholarship is called Orientalism, then it means it is not scientific, or it's not real study of Islam. It's just ideology. Okay? So basically, one of the best things that Edward Said has done was to intervene and show Orientalism as a discourse of power.
Right.
As a discourse of power that sought to enable the West to intervene in the Islamic world militarily, and carry its mission civilisatrice, or civilizing mission, into the Muslim world. Okay, so basically, Orientalism was the handmaiden of imperialism.
Sure.
Okay, so what is being done now is there are people who tried, of course, to do damage control to Orientalism, but they never succeeded to totally debunk Edward Said's ideas about Orientalism.
Okay.
But of course, still there are major people like Bernard Lewis who continue to, he's a major Orientalist who continues to produce knowledge about Islam that questions, and always questions the origins of Islam and casts doubt on Islam. And specifically, the problems to be aware of now is most Orientalists are concentrated on the Sirah literature.
Okay.
They want to challenge the Muslim story of beginnings.
Okay.
By saying that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was influenced by Judaism and Christianity, that Islam did not appear during the time of Prophet Muhammad, but 200 years later. Okay, they come up with all kind of fantastic theories about Islam that has provides no evidence.
Okay.
No evidence related to the space or documents or anything that is related, that is hard evidence. All their ideas are based on certain surmises, certain suggestions, certain ideologies.
Sure.
So basically, I've read like 10 books, and mainly there is that questioning of how Islam started.
Sure.
They're concerned with that. So basically, they're trying to say that Islam is more or less was a messianic religion that appeared during the end of the Roman Empire, where so many people claim to be prophets. So Islam is just one more messianic idea, or Islam is a Christian heresy, like Orientalists, early Orientalists used to say. So Islam is a Christian heresy. Prophet Muhammad has read books from earlier times. He's been associated with Jews. So they are bringing up all kinds of theories that have no proof in reality or in hard historical evidence.
Okay.
But they, of course, there is a problem because most of them start with a rejection of Islamic sources.
Okay.
So they want to know about Islam, but from sources not sources not Arabic. They totally reject Arabic sources like Al-Tabari or.
I mean, why do the Orientalists have such a contention with the ilm of the science of hadith, the statements of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him?
Actually, they want to, some of them have certain theories that much of the hadith literature was invented later on for political, as a result of political expediency to praise a certain kind of person or certain kind of people. And of course, that's the whole structure of Orientalism, is to have a very big thesis or theory, to have an assumption, and then they go to Islamic history and try to prove that assumption.
Okay.
So they start with a fact, and then they prove it. They use Islamic history as a kind of proof.
Okay.
They don't start with a question, then try to answer it. They start with a conclusion, and then start to provide evidence from Islamic history to support the conclusion.
Okay. And Doctor, is it fair to say that the efforts of the Orientalists in trying to attack the Quran has been one of major failure?
Of course, because basically they wanted to relate Quran to other traditions, but it never materialized. They tried to question the language of the Quran as faulty or not reflecting Arabic, the real Arabic. They, of course, they try, for example, to say that some of the Quranic verses are a reflection of early Arabic poetry, like that of Umayyah ibn Salt.
Okay.
They just try to bring some similarities or some phrases from the Quran that appeared in Umayyah ibn Salt's, one of the early poets. So basically, but that is not an evidence.
Okay.
The Quran was concocted or concocted from other sources,
Okay.
and put into one whole.
Sure. And Doctor, when we look at the world today, where are some of the major Oriental institutions around the world today that are really working hard?
Actually, there's no Orientalism. It is classical sense doesn't exist any longer.
Okay.
You have institutions. You have area studies programs, Middle East, Eastern studies programs, that want to, some of them are trying to be objective, others do fail to be objective, and that is the problem.
Sure. In that case, Doctor, with your experience and your knowledge of Orientalism, what would you advise Muslims, just normal Muslims, how should they react to Orientalism and Orientalist material?
The only solution to Orientalism is more involvement of Muslim scholars. We should produce very good knowledge about ourselves. We should produce very high quality scholars to challenge the ideas of Orientalism. Okay. This is the only way, is to produce your own knowledge about yourself, so you don't need to consult others and read books about, because most of the books that talk about Islam and in modern times are in English, produced by non-Muslims.
Okay. So, Doctor, would you recommend somebody who wants to study Islam to study it in a Western university where it's possibly Oriental?
I would recommend Al-Azhar University, Islamic universities. That's where you get a classical vision of Islam, not an Orientalist vision of Islam.
Okay. And so what would you recommend when a person does go, let's say, if he does go and study in a Western university and from an Orientalist perspective, how should he be aware of the sensitive issues?
Of course, you have to have a strong basic knowledge, strong base knowledge of Islam from a traditional university like Al-Azhar or Islamic University in Medina, or Imam Muhammad ibn Saud Islamic University in Riyadh, in Malaysia or in Morocco. These are important Islamic universities that produce classical knowledge, very strong knowledge about Islam. Okay. So you don't go and study Islam in a Western university without having already done some homework in a Muslim country.
Excellent, very nice. Also, Doctor, could I ask you about some of the famous Orientalists that are out there writing material, and who should we be aware of to know that they are Orientalists?
Basically, the one I mentioned is the one, remember his
Bernard
name?
Lewis, was it?
Bernard Lewis, yeah. He's the main, he is the last Orientalist, if you want, and he is, he has Zionist connections.
Okay.
And that's why he sees that the Arabs are incapable of revolution, okay, and modern times events proved him wrong. He subscribes to the idea that Islam and modernity are not compatible. Islam and democracy are not compatible. That Islam is enraged at modernity.
Okay. That
Islam, which means that Muslims are living in medieval times, and they should be kept there, or otherwise they will use terrorism and violence to challenge Western modernism, which they don't like.
Sure. And Doctor, my final question to you would be about Orientalists themselves. What background are they coming from? Are they coming from a Christian background, or an atheistic background, or a Zionist background, as you just mentioned?
No, in terms of background, you have all backgrounds. You have Zionists, you have Jewish Orientalists, you have Christians, you have atheists, you have all kinds of Orientalists, and they're all as bad as the others.
Okay.
Regardless of their background, because Orientalism is basically an ideology, it's not science.
Okay. Thank you very much, Doctor. We've come to the end of this fantastic episode. I'd like to thank you very much once again for coming to the studio and to give us your time and to give your expertise as well.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Conclude also by saying Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Dear viewers, we've come to the end of our program today on the Pool of Ideas, where we had a look at Orientalism, and I'm sure just like myself, you've been educated on a number of points, some new points that we were unaware of. This is the whole point of this beautiful series, where we get to look at ideologies, get to look at theories, and truly understand them, and try to see and put a connection with it with regards to Islam. So dear viewers, we've heard the doctor talk about Orientalism, and what's the step? What can we do to better ourselves with regards to this ideology? Twofold. Number one, as common Muslims, we need to increase our knowledge. Read more about the Quran, read more about the Sunnah, get your Iman, get your conviction stronger. And secondly, just like the doctor said, a gentle reminder to our Muslim scholars to really work a little bit harder and to take their responsibilities a little bit more serious, and to to take these challenges forward. Otherwise, we will be left with lots of doubt and we will have no answers to solve those questions. Dear viewers, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to this fantastic episode, and hopefully we will see you in an upcoming program on the pools of ideas. So until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi